Good afternoon and welcome to an episode of Ask Mr. Long Island, formerly known as Mr. Long Island's Search for Truth and Beauty, and we'll get into that transition in a moment. Our guests today are Guillot and Skye Ostreicher, two of the coolest names on Long Island. It's just like I've been practicing all morning. It's like, wow, Skye Ostreicher. I love
you
that.
Nailed it too.
And I did. Well, I practiced all the way over here. And what we do with this program is we discuss issues that need to be discussed on Long Island to keep Long Island vital. And we also highlight efforts and organizations that are looking to do good on Long Island. And you guys qualify as both. So we're really grateful for you to be here. We were called Mr. Long Island's Search for Truth and Beauty, and it just takes me too damn long to say that. So we came up with Ask Mr. Long Island because what we do here is we try to match needs with resources. So if you can't find what you need or if you're looking for something, ask Mr. Long Island and I'll get it for you. There's a website, askmrlongisland.com. More on that at another time because I want to get right to the really important stuff. And one of the things we do every week is we talk about pizza. And the reason for that is, as diverse as Long Island is, you got 126 divergent communities. The one thing every town on Long Island has in common is a pizza place. And the one thing every Long Islander will do is they will drive past 12 of those pizza places to get to a really good pizza place. So we are compiling a kick-ass database of great pizza places by asking our guests, where's your favorite pizza place? And the criteria is, if you had guests coming in from out of town and you really wanted to show off the region, where would you take them? So Skye, ladies first.
Well, I grew up in Syosset.
Okay.
So I would have to go with Mario's Pizza.
Okay.
They do a taco pizza with the beef and all the taco seasonings and everything.
Now, is this part of the Mario's? There's one in Comac and one in Seaford?
I believe it is a chain.
Okay. Yeah. Well, a Long Island chain.
Yes.
And not like a Pizza Hut chain, because they're great.
Yes.
And we've had them before. So Mario's, where in Syosset?
On Jericho Turnpike.
Jericho Turnpike. Jeff?
So I'll give you some background before I reveal what my place is. But as you're heading down 347 by the intersection with 454, there's a kind of anonymous little shopping center that is home not just to the best pizza on Long Island, but also the best bagels on Long Island.
Okay.
And in that shopping center, you have Ciro's Pizza,
okay,
and also the famous 24-hour hot bagels. One of the few places on Long Island where they say they make their own bagels and actually do. And so in that little corridor, you have the two staple foods of the region.
Yes.
And if I had out-of-town guests, that is where I would take them. And I've done it before.
And Ciro's is a great example because you're not going to just walk in there accidentally. It's a destination place. You
Absolutely.
have to know about it. So you've done our viewers a tremendous service.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
Because that's really what we want people who don't really know about some of the places to say, wow, I've driven past there a million times. So that's really cool. So thank you very much for participating. Jeff, you run the Suburban Millennial Institute.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that, and then I want to get into the event that you're planning next Friday on March 13th.
Sure. So the Suburban Millennial Institute is a non-partisan think tank that is dedicated to finding public policy solutions to keep young folks on Long Island. And our main agenda is twofold. We believe in millennial retention and family support on Long Island. And
how long has this been around, and what was the genesis behind it?
So we got started, I guess it was the winter of 2013.
Okay.
The genesis behind it was, I saw all my friends start to leave. I'm originally from Smithtown. Like a lot of folks, I moved to the city for a while after college.
Right.
Came back home, and my wife and I now live in Babylon Village. And I witnessed firsthand the mass exodus of folks from this area because it's not affordable, and there isn't a lot of jobs, and you don't have there's a lot of quality of life issues. It's not exciting. It's not a destination like New York City is, and like a lot of other places are. So I decided the best way that I could help engage in this dialogue is to found this organization.
And now you touched on a couple of interesting points. It's not affordable, but we're losing a lot of people to Brooklyn, which isn't cheap. Mm-hmm. But I think really the heart of the matter is it's not very interesting. Mm. And that's almost by design, because previous generations, coming back from World War II and the 60s and all the upheaval that brought, you just kind of wanted to come out here for peace and quiet.
Sure.
Which, isn't necessarily a bad thing. But I think the millennials on Long Island, they just want a little bit of a hybrid, if you will. Maybe like an interesting downtown, but you can walk to a nice residential area.
Oh, you're absolutely right. I mean, there's been a paradigm shift over time,
Right.
where folks who are coming into the workforce now, folks between the ages of 18 and 36, which is how the census classifies millennials, they want a certain amount of excitement. I
Right.
mean, there's a lot of empirical data out there, and the New York Times recently ran an article about this that says that the majority of millennials, over 60% of millennials, will move to a destination not having a job. Just so they can be in that destination. And that is a stark departure from the baby boomer generation.
Well, and I've also read and heard that the jobs will go to where the people are, which I think people always thought it was the other way around. You know, you create the jobs and the people show up, which I think would also work.
Oh, sure.
But if you could get the people here, keep them here. And the irony is, what you hate about Long Island when you're 25, you love about it when you're 35, and the
Sure.
trick is to keep them there for those 10 years. Now, Skye, you grew up on Long Island as well?
Yes, I grew up in Syosset.
Okay.
And then moved to West Hampton and actually went to West Hampton High School.
Okay. And do you find that your peers and colleagues are
Yes,
here?
No, most of them are not here. Most of them are elsewhere, westbound in the boroughs and in Manhattan or elsewhere.
And then, you know, the other challenge is it's kind of like the Field of Dreams. When you leave, when you go past into the cornfield, it's very difficult to come back. Although I have met young people who, there's a young lady that I know, she moved to Washington, and she said, I can do two things in Washington I can't do on Long Island. I can live in an apartment and take the train to work. And she did that
So
for about...
Washington State, not Washington,
Washington, D.C.
Oh, D.C. Okay.
Yeah, she went to D.C. I can live in an apartment and I can take the train to work. But she came back because she just missed her homeland. You know? So what we're looking to do, or what Suburban Millennial Institute is looking to effectuate the policy or push it, or what would quantify as a success for you?
Well, I think there is, as opposed to a few years ago, you now have unanimity among policymakers about the fact that this issue is real.
Okay.
About the fact that...
Which is a significant development.
Which is a significant development. There was a time where you had a few lonely politicians, out on their soapbox talking about this. And now across the political spectrum, on both sides of the aisle, in both Nassau and Suffolk counties, people understand that this is a problem that must be addressed quickly. The Nassau County Comptroller recently issued a report that highlights this and talks about the need to retain millennials by creating more jobs in certain sectors. So a win for us would be, to have a broad spectrum of folks from the private sector, from the public sector, entrepreneurs all working together to achieve a common good, which is why we're having this conference.
Yeah, I was going to say, let's use that as a segue. Tell us a little bit about the conference. It's Friday, March 13th.
That's correct.
At Hofstra University.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Next Friday morning. It's from 8 a.m. until noon.
All right.
And we're going to have 3 panels assembled. One is specifically catered to jobs in the public sector, where we'll have some government officials on the panel.
Okay.
Then the second panel is the private sector. Talk about some developers on the panel that talk about different private sector investment type jobs on Long Island. And then the third panel is a panel of millennial-aged entrepreneurs,
Wow.
which is the first time in any of the conferences we've been to that they've done this, where it's these actual entrepreneurs that have created their own opportunities here for themselves on Long Island.
Let's touch on that, because I think that's really key. Long Island's history is entrepreneurialism. The MRI was invented here, the moon thing, the Grumman. Leroy Grumman started with he towed a plane from White Plains to his house in Baldwin, fixed it, and from that Grumman became this huge complex. So the history is there, and I think what you're trying to do is kind of reintroduce that a little bit.
Absolutely. Well, and that's already beginning to happen. I mean, you see, there is now venture capital investment in this region. You have all of the launch pad facilities in Huntington, Mineola, and Great Neck, where you have folks who are looking to invest in startup companies that are going to stay here on Long Island, and we need to do a lot more of that in order to encourage folks to stay here and to be able to have viable jobs here.
So who should come to this conference? What kind of guests are you? What kind of audience members are you
Everyone.
for?
What I was, even from what Jeff was just saying, to show that we're having that at the conference and highlight the examples of entrepreneurs and show everyone that there is a room full of people that are interested and engaged in this issue is what we're looking for. So all ages, millennials themselves, especially millennials themselves, to show the older populations, or any population senior to the millennial generation, that there are millennials here that are interested in this type of conversation.
And one of the things I thought was really intriguing about this conference is the fact that it's taking place at Hofstra, which is a tremendous resource for the community.
Oh, yeah.
Why don't you talk a little bit about the relationships you have there? And
Sure.
how
Well, the National Center for Suburban Studies is at Hofstra.
Okay.
And Larry Levy, the dean over there, has been a phenomenal help to the Institute back from when we started a couple of years ago. And we'd long been kicking around the idea of doing this. And now this conference is going to be bring vision to action. I mean, there are firm believers there, as are other folks in academia, that something needs to be done in order to retain millennials.
Right.
We're not doing enough to accomplish that. Last week, the Nassau County Comptroller, who, as I mentioned, issued a report on this topic, held a legislative hearing where you had folks representing Adelphi, Hofstra, and other colleges and universities saying that they see the same problem. We provide a top-notch public and private education, both on the secondary and college levels to folks. But the problem is that a lot of those folks, while they're getting their degree, their head is already in their next move. They've already dismissed Long Island. I myself am a political science professor at SUNY Farmingdale, and I see this firsthand. My best and brightest students oftentimes have their head in their next move, which usually involves going to New York City, going to Florida, going to California, places where you have more excitement, presumably more affordability, to pursue their next job opportunity.
Is that a problem that Long Island? I mean, how do we solve that problem? Or it's a problem that it really exists. I mean, there's this perception that there's really nothing for young people to do, and to a certain extent, it's true. I mean, nightlife, there isn't. You know, you can't hit one club outside of a couple of downtowns. You know, there's no downtown Long Island. There's no focal point to Long Island. How do we change that? How do we make Long Island a more exciting place for young people to live?
Well, 3 words: transit-oriented development.
Okay.
That's how you accomplish this, and it's already happening. I mean, like I said, I live in Babylon Village, which I think should be a region-wide model for how to do this effectively. You have the Long Island Railroad stopping in Babylon. It's a major hub. The village itself has a thriving nightlife, and furthermore, perhaps more importantly, I can accomplish all of my utilitarian needs in Babylon without having to get in the car. And when I need to travel into the city, as I have to do about once a week, I can walk to the station and take the train in. And it creates a mini urban environment. And quite frankly, if it wasn't for those environments, and if it wasn't for transit-oriented development, I'd probably be living in Manhattan right now.
Well, one of the things that Tom Suozzi used to talk about when he was Nassau County executive, he was pushing cool downtowns, and he really, to me, it wasn't too far off the mark. I mean, do we want to talk a little bit about that? Is that going to come up at the conference? Or
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, Tom was right on the mark, and it's certainly going to come up at the conference.
Yes. I mean, we love the phrase, cool downtowns.
And he talked about turning a lot of these places, like Uniondale, into a place, into a destination. You know, his tagline
so
was...
But Uniondale doesn't have a downtown, though.
Yeah.
See, and I have my op-ed piece in the Business News this week. You have this huge opportunity in Hicksville.
Right.
Completely agree with you. Unbelievable.
You talk about transit-oriented development. That's an express ride into the city under an hour. You're a couple of miles away from all the great economic activity going. Well, you talk to me a little bit about Hicksville. What can we do to make that place happen?
Sure. Well, I mean, overall in Nassau County, you only need about between 3 and 8% of the overall, stock to change in order for it to be a place that can be an attraction. Most of Nassau County should stay the same. Most of Suffolk County should stay the same too.
Right.
We're only talking about concentrated development in certain areas. You could do a lot with Hicksville for all the reasons you mentioned. If they had more rental stock in that area and more development that's aimed towards millennials, you're exactly right. A lot of the stuff that the Tom Suozzi and Steve Ballone and Ed Mangano and many others have talked about can become a reality. You already have Grumman Studios, which is now a movie production hub right down the road from there. Why not have the folks who are working there and making movies living in Hicksville instead of taking the train all the way back into Brooklyn every day?
And all the high-tech stuff, you got Lyft down there, you got all this Homeland Security companies there.
Oh, yeah.
Right, a lot of technology stuff. And what Jeff mentioned before, the forum that the Nassau County Controller hosted about 2 weeks ago, we went they talked about making Long Island into the biotech capital of the nation, they said, with all the technology resources we have, along with the healthcare resources that we have here as well.
Well, you have Cold Spring Harbor, you have Stony Brook University, you have Brookhaven National, you have all these...
LIJ.
Nassau LIJ.
Yeah.
Nassau's biggest employers is North Shore LIJ.
Yeah, which is an interesting topic of conversation, but what needs to be done to make Hicksville happen? And, I spoke with Eric Alexander last week, and he was sharing with me that he's got a coalition of civic organizations that are working together. Are you familiar with that? Are you working?
Well, I mean, ultimately, in Hicksville or Port Washington or Huntington or any place where there's talk about, about going in this direction, about more transit-oriented development, the first thing you have to do is earn community support for it, and that's a problem on Long Island. This region is home to a great deal of parochial thinking. That's one of the reasons why you're never going to see, I don't think, in the next decade or so, any substantive steps taken to right-size local government. Folks like villages. They like they like paying a lot of money in property taxes for the services you get.
Right.
And so
if you get them.
If you get them.
You don't plow the streets after a blizzard. You're going to have a revolution on
You're absolutely right about that. But there's a great deal of NIMBYism out there. There's a lot of folks who think affordable housing and millennial housing, and I think that's something that they don't want. A lot of folks have a similar reaction when they hear about over 55 housing.
Right.
That you're not going to have enough money being contributed to the tax base and to the school districts. And so there are naysayers for everything. And breaking down those parochial barriers is a real problem that a lot of developers face, a lot of community groups face, and that we face.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things I love what Don Monte was doing in Renaissance Downtown, where you reach out to the community and get their input first. Because now you have ambassadors and you have buy-in where you didn't have that before.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see Suburban Millennial Institute? Are you doing stuff like that? You're working with the... what's on the radar screen for the next couple of years? Why don't you walk us through a little bit about what's coming up beyond the conference?
Immediately beyond the conference, we want to develop a public policy work group that with a lot of different minds from a lot of the different organizations and public sector, private sector, and meet and talk about a legislative agenda that we could put through over the next year and a half.
Exactly. I think there needs to be a broad group put together to enact a lot of the things that not just the comptroller in Nassau County are talking about, but also groups like the Long Island Index and Congressman Steve Israel, who all agree that we need to expand the medical sector. That's the best way to attract new jobs. Well, there's a lot of big picture talk that we have to do that. And again, just like transit-oriented development, there seems to be broad consensus that this is the way to go. However, now you have to figure out how to actually make the sausage on this.
Right.
How can actors on the federal, state, and county governments work together to fund this kind of expansion? From a legislative initiative standpoint, what do you have to do? What do we have to get out of Albany in order to make this happen? And someone has to draw a blueprint as to how exactly to do that. That's something we want to be very helpful with.
And the key to all that is showing up. 85% of life is showing up, and it starts with your conference on the 13th at Hofstra. Mm-hmm. Where would somebody go? Anyone who has any kind of interest in what transpires on Long Island in the next 20 years should be at this thing, safe to say?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Where do they get information about it?
Our website.
Yes, suburbanmillennial.com is the website.
Okay.
There you can register online for the conference, get our whole lineup of speakers. We've got some fabulous folks.
Speakers.
Yes. Yeah. Congressman Lee Zeldin is going to be speaking at the event, as well as Joan Kuhl, who is the founder of a national nonprofit called Why Millennials Matter, who's going to give a presentation talking about what specifically millennials look for in the workplace.
Terrific. So if you have any kind of investment in Long Island, young, old, whatever, you got to be there.
Come on down.
Yes.
And
it is free and open.
Free and open. Okay. Hofstra University, Jeff and Skye, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. This has been the first episode of Ask Mr. Long Island, but yet another episode where we talk about issues pertaining to Long Island's vitality. I thank you very much for joining us. My name is Michael Watt, a.k.a. Mr. Long Island, and we'll see you next time.